You're watching Research Talk, a show that explores the benefits and impact of research, not just at universities and enterprises that rely on innovation, but also how research impacts quality of life. I'm your host, Liz Mosley-Hawkins. The educational landscape at our nation's colleges and universities is quickly changing. Leaders at these institutions are finding they must quickly adapt by enhancing their vision to meet the needs of students, faculty, and staff. But what is also required is their own ability to modify their skills so they may become better leaders, who in turn are able to meet the ever-evolving needs of students. Dr. Lewis Whitesides, whose career in higher education is underscored by his pursuit to stay ahead of the curve, is one such game changer. With 23 years in various fields, from computer science, manufacturing operations, community development, and 8 years in research administration and higher education, Dr. Whitesides has developed a strong reputation among his peers as a strategist and visionary leader whose leadership principles focus on entrepreneurship, collaboration, and services. We'll talk with Dr. Whitesides on how some of his key life experiences have helped define his approach to developing and leading dynamic teams, encouraging his passion for international research, and gives him the courage to take risks. As with most individuals, our life experiences help shape us into the persons we are today. Today, of course, we have with us Dr. Lewis Whitesides. Dr. Whitesides, you've come from humble beginnings, a working class family from rural South Carolina. And from that environment, you developed a sense of entrepreneurship. And it's quite an interesting story. Can you talk to our viewers a little bit about how you looked at your family land, not just as a huge playground, but more so as a means to generate income?
Well, first of all, hello, Liz.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's good. Well, it's interesting you asked me this question because, as I think back, again, I do come from humble beginnings. Like, my parents got divorced when I was really young. I was like 7 years old, and we stayed in Orangeburg. But during that time, we moved, and after we moved out to my mother's family land. Her grandfather and her father subsequently left her land that she actually built a house on, and it was about 224 acres. So 9 years old, we out there playing, we doing the stuff, and Atlanta just growing up, but I'm looking at farmers in the fields across, crops growing. So I asked my mother, I was like, well, why don't we grow any crops? Why ain't no crops on our land? She was like, well, that's our land, we don't farm it, such and such. So I asked her, like, well, do you think we could make some money off of it? Renting it to the other farmers and doing stuff? She was like, well, I don't know if we can actually do that sort of thing. But my curiosity was already piqued. So I asked a farmer that I knew, Mr. Melvin Crum, was one of the biggest farmers in our area, about it. He was like, well, hey, Lewis, I really want to rent your land. Your mama won't rent it to me like that. So I came home and said, hey, Mom, Mr. Crum wants to rent the land. She was like, no, we're not going to rent no land, that sort of thing. She was real sentimental to the land. It's my grandfather's land, and my father passed it down to me, so, I really don't want nobody on our land. So, I kept working on it, and we talked and talked. And so John Frederick, who was an extension agent from Clemson, a Clemson extension agent, stayed up the street. So I went up to his house, riding my motorcycle, and I said, Mr. Frederick, how much it costs how much people pay to rent the land? So he actually showed me the almanac and showed what crops need to go in the land, when they need to be planted, all those kind of things, and how much you make off of the land. So now I'm thinking like, man, we have 200 acres. And man, if we could make $2,000 per acre, I was doing the math and thought it was a lot of money because, again, we were not rich. My mother worked, she was a teacher, so we had a little bit of stuff, but we didn't have a whole lot. So I thought about, like, man, we could really make some money. So now my mind went into overdrive, like, how do I convince my mother to do this? Well, I couldn't convince her to do it, but what I did convince her to do, our next door neighbor, Mr. Phelps, wanted to do farming. He didn't have any of the startup money. So me talking to him, again, just in the neighborhood talking, and again, keep in mind, I'm like 10 years old. I said, well, Mr. Phelps, let me ask you this. If you could use our land and plant the crops, could you split the profits with us? He was like, Whiteside, that might work. You know? I'm like, okay, well, let me ask my mama. So I went back, asked my mother again, like, Mom, Mr. Phelps said if he can use our land at the end when he harvests the crops, he'll pay us, you know, a portion of it. And still my mother was like, okay, well, just get the details. I think at that time she was like, this boy keep coming to me about planting, about farming, renting out land. She said, get the details. So again, I went back up to John Frederick, who's the Clemson Extension agent, and said, hey, Mr. Frederick, how should this work? He told me, hey, you need a contract. If you get Mr. Phelps to agree to give you, and I asked him what was a good number. He said 25%. He said, so if he makes a hypothetical $100,000 and he give you $25,000 and you don't have to do anything, man, that's a win-win, man. I was like, well, you might need to talk to my mama, but let me go talk to her again. So I go back, I talked to my mother again. This took place over a few months now, so this didn't happen all at once. And I went back and talked to my mother. I said, Mr. Frederick, I want to talk to you about the land. She was like, boy, you're talking about this land again? I'm like, yeah, we could make some money. Mm-hmm. So Mr. Frederick did talk to my mother about it and helped put this whole thing together. Long story short, we became sharecroppers. Wow. Mr. Phelps came in, he planted the land. You know, he just was getting off the ground trying to get his farm together. And at the end of the harvest season, he paid us as he should. And man, it was a good boost. It paid the taxes on the land and we got a little bit of money out of it. So that went on for a few years. So as I got older, about 15, I think this happened about 5 years, it really became a good economic boost to our family. As it went on, Mr. Phelps' kids graduated and left, and so he couldn't maintain a farm anymore, so he didn't want to do it anymore. But now, in the back of my mind, if you remember, Melvin Crum, who was one of the big farmers, wanted to use our land. So at that time, I was of age, and I can talk the talk and that sort of thing. So I called up Mr. Crum and said, hey, Mr. Crum, listen, man, I think you can rent the land now. He said, I don't think your mama gonna let you do it. I said, she will. I said, come by the house. I said, Mom, Mr. Crum called me and talk about renting the land. She came to the house, but she was open to it this time because she had already seen what we could actually do with it. Long story short, Mr. Crum rented that land until his death. And this went on for 20 years. And right now, his nephew, Antron, rents the land right now, so it's continuing. So my mother has since passed on, but I still rent the land right now to a farmer to actually farm our land right now. So it's that kind of started me into agriculture and that sort of thing, and a little entrepreneur spirit and that sort of thing. But it really turned out really well.
I definitely love that story because it's not your typical lemonade stand, story. I mean, you were well beyond your years in thinking. So how does that now, the skills that you acquired then, how does that help shape you as you are developing research projects and even thinking about ways to use, your entrepreneurial skills?
Well, when you think about research, if you think about the faculty who conduct research or whoever funds the research, it is an entrepreneur enterprise. Everybody's working for some payout some kind of way. So I think that actually helped me shaped me in the way of being able to communicate with all parties and making sure everyone gets what they want out of the situation. So my mother didn't think she wanted anything, but when I could actually tie all the pieces together to show her how it would benefit, and her growing up on a farm, it wasn't foreign to her, but I don't think she really wanted to get into the farm and the operations of it. Again, she was a single parent, she was a woman, it was 3 of us, and then my little sister came, made 4 of us. She was worried about raising us and educating us and that sort of thing. The land was taking care of itself. But the land really took care of itself. I mean, it really gave us a leg up when we did that. So I think communication and being able to communicate the pluses to all parties involved and getting the right people at the table, making sure they connect and making sure that everyone needs are met. When it's a win-win for everybody, it's easier to do. And I think I learned that going through that process with my mother. And I think the good thing about it was everybody was right there at my disposal, so I couldn't move around. Mr. Phelps stayed next door. You had Mr. Frederick that stayed right up the road right there, who really helped. in the whole process. And then on top of that, all these people knew my mother because all of them grew up in the same area. So they kind of knew how stubborn she was. So they really didn't think I could get it done. But with their help, was able to get it done. So communication is the big key, and being able to communicate to everyone involved what the outcomes are going to be, and making sure that the outcomes are positive as you planned.
Thank you.
Thank you.